This story is a fictionalized dramatization inspired by celebrity talk show rumors, not a factual report, and it opens on a tense morning buzz surrounding Kelly Clarkson's show as staff whisper about an unexpected edge in the air. Jerry Seinfeld arrives with his trademark calm, joking lightly with producers, but there's an undercurrent that something is off. The audience senses it too, clapping a bit louder, unsure if they're about to witness comedy gold or an uncomfortable moment that will ripple far beyond the studio walls. Kelly welcomes Jerry with warmth, praising his legacy and influence, and at first the exchange feels familiar and playful. They trade light banter about stand-up life, aging, and the absurdity of modern fame. Jerry smiles, but his eyes narrow slightly when the conversation drifts toward the pressures of staying relevant. The laughter continues, yet there's a subtle stiffness, as if both hosts are walking across thin ice without openly acknowledging the cracks beneath their feet. The mood shifts when Kelly brings up how comedians today navigate social media outrage and changing audience sensitivities. Jerry responds with a measured but firm stance, suggesting comedy is being boxed in by fear. The audience laughs nervously, unsure whether to clap. Kelly gently pushes back, defending evolving perspectives and empathy. What starts as a thoughtful debate slowly sharpens, the smiles becoming polite masks rather than genuine expressions of ease. Jerry's tone grows more serious as he argues that comedy should provoke without apology. Kelly counters that words carry weight, especially on massive platforms. The studio grows quieter, laughter replaced by attentive silence. Cameras catch Jerry leaning forward, hands clasped, his voice calm but edged with frustration. Kelly maintains composure, yet her eyebrows lift, signaling she's not backing down from a conversation she believes matters deeply. The exchange becomes personal when Jerry implies that daytime television often softens hard truths. Kelly bristles, defending her show as a space for honest conversation, not censorship. The audience shifts in their seats. Producers backstage exchange worried looks, aware that this is drifting far from the planned light-hearted segment. Jerry's trademark observational humor gives way to pointed commentary, and the energy in the room tightens noticeably. Kelly attempts to steer things back with a joke, but it lands flat. Jerry pauses, then responds bluntly, saying forced cheerfulness can dilute meaningful discourse. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Kelly's smile fades for a moment before she regains it, asserting that kindness and honesty aren't opposites. The conversation now feels less like an interview and more like an ideological standoff unfolding live before millions. Jerry crosses his arms, visibly uncomfortable, and says he didn't come to be lectured. Kelly calmly replies that this agreement isn't a lecture. The tension spikes. Audience laughter disappears entirely, replaced by a heavy stillness. The band sits frozen, unsure if they'll be cued. Viewers at home would later describe this moment as watching two powerful personalities refuse to yield, each convinced they're defending something essential. Jerry glances off stage, perhaps toward the producer, then back to Kelly. He says comedians are tired of being misunderstood. Kelly responds that public figures must accept interpretation as part of influence. The words hang thick in the air. Jerry exhales sharply, his legendary patience thinning. This isn't the breezy talk show stop fans expected. It's a raw, unscripted collision of values playing out in real time. The tipping point arrives when Kelly asks if Jerry believes empathy weakens comedy. He stiffens, replying that comedy doesn't need permission. The audience gasps softly. Kelly, still composed, says permission isn't the issue, responsibility is. Jerry shakes his head, clearly frustrated, muttering that this isn't why he agreed to appear. The disconnect between intent and outcome becomes painfully obvious. Jerry stands abruptly, the movement startling everyone. Kelly looks genuinely surprised, asking if he's okay. He replies that he's done with the conversation. Gasps echo through the studio. Cameras scramble to adjust as producers whisper frantically through headsets. Jerry thanks the audience curtly, his voice tight, signaling this isn't a joke or bit but a genuine breaking point. Kelly rises slightly from her chair, urging him to stay and talk it out. Jerry pauses, then says some debates are better left off stage. The crowd is silent now, fully aware they're witnessing something unprecedented. His usual wit is gone, replaced by stern resolve. He turns toward the exit, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. As Jerry walks off, the band doesn't play. Kelly stands there, visibly shaken yet professional, telling the audience they'll take a quick break. The cameras cut, but the damage is done. Social media explodes within minutes, clips spreading like wildfire. Fans argue fiercely, choosing sides, dissecting every word, every glance, every pause that led to this dramatic walkout. Backstage rumors swirl about heated exchanges after the cameras stopped. Some claim Jerry felt ambushed, others saw Kelly was blindsided by his reaction. Neither side releases an immediate statement, allowing speculation to grow unchecked. Headlines exaggerate, opinions harden, and the incident becomes less about what was said and more about what people believe it represented in a divided cultural moment. Commentators frame it as a clash between old-school comedy and modern sensitivity. Supporters of Jerry praise his refusal to compromise, calling it principled. Kelly's fans applaud her grace under pressure, admiring her willingness to engage tough topics respectfully. The fictionalized narrative takes on a life of its own, fueled by think pieces, reaction videos, and endless online debates. Industry insiders whisper that producers everywhere are rethinking live interviews. The risk of unscripted confrontation suddenly feels very real. Talk shows, once safe promotional stops, are recast as potential battlegrounds. The Jerry Kelly moment becomes a cautionary tale, cited in meetings as an example of how quickly a friendly chat can turn into a viral storm. In this imagined aftermath, Jerry retreats from public appearances for a while, letting the noise settle. Kelly addresses the audience days later, emphasizing respect and open dialogue without naming him directly. Her message is calm, measured, and widely praised. The contrast between silence and reassurance only adds layers to the public's interpretation of what truly happened. Fans replay the footage repeatedly, analyzing body language and tone. Was Jerry defensive from the start? Or did the questions push too hard? Did Kelly misjudge the line between curiosity and challenge? Each viewer sees something different, projecting their own beliefs onto the exchange. The incident becomes a mirror reflecting broader cultural tensions rather than a simple disagreement. Late-night comedians joke about it cautiously, aware of the irony. Satirical takes soften the edge but keep the story alive. Even fictional retellings blur with reality, making it harder to separate fact from dramatization. The moment cements itself in pop culture memory as an example of live television's unpredictable power. Weeks later, hypothetical reports suggest private apologies were exchanged, though nothing is confirmed. The public, however, rarely lets go easily. Clips resurface whenever discussions about cancel culture, free speech, or daytime television arise. The walk-off becomes shorthand for unresolved debates that society continues to wrestle with. Kelly's show moves forward, ratings steady, her reputation largely intact. Jerry returns to stand-up stages, weaving vague references to awkward interviews into his routines. Audiences laugh, sensing the subtext without needing explicit detail. Comedy, after all, has a way of metabolizing conflict into material. In this fictional narrative, the incident isn't about villains or heroes. It's about misalignment, timing, and the risk of honesty colliding with expectation. Both figures are portrayed as human, flawed, and passionate, caught in a moment that spiraled beyond control because neither wanted to retreat from deeply held convictions. Media scholars later describe the moment as a case study in live broadcast tension. They note how tone, framing, and audience expectation can magnify disagreement. What might have been a private debate instead became a public spectacle, reminding viewers that authenticity on camera can be both compelling and dangerous. The imagined confrontation also sparks conversations about how entertainment spaces handle serious discourse. Should talk shows challenge guests, or prioritize comfort? There's no clear answer, only evolving norms. The Jerry Kelly moment, real or not, symbolizes that ongoing negotiation in modern media. Fans eventually grow tired of arguing, but the clip never fully disappears. It resurfaces whenever cultural fault lines widen. The walk-off becomes less shocking over time, more symbolic, a reference point rather than fresh outrage. Memory smooths the sharpest edges, leaving behind a story that feels almost mythic. In retellings, details change slightly, emotions intensify, lines sharpen. That's how legends form. What remains constant is the image of a comedian standing up and choosing exit over engagement, and a host left balancing professionalism with personal reaction. It's a tableau that sticks because it's so human. The fictional script underscores how quickly public moments escape private control. Once broadcast, they belong to everyone and no one. Interpretation becomes collective, messy, and often unfair. Yet that's the nature of shared cultural experiences, especially when famous figures are involved. Whether viewers sympathize with Jerry or Kelly often says more about their own values than the exchange itself. That's why the story endures. It isn't resolved neatly, it lingers, inviting endless discussion without offering definitive answers. In the end, this dramatized tale isn't about a storming exit alone. It's about communication breakdowns, generational shifts, and the fragile balance between humor and responsibility. The walk-off is just the climax, not the whole story. As time passes, the intensity fades, replaced by reflection. What could have gone differently? Was there a moment where empathy might have bridged the gap? Those questions matter more than assigning blame, turning a sensational incident into a lesson about dialogue in public spaces. This long-form fictional account closes with a reminder that live television captures truth and tension in equal measure. When strong voices collide, sparks fly, sometimes illuminating deeper issues, sometimes just burning briefly before fading. Either way, the moment leaves a mark, etched into collective memory as a reminder of how unpredictable and revealing unscripted conversation can be. In the weeks following the Imagine fallout, media analysts continue to mine the moment for meaning, treating it like a cultural artifact frozen in time. Panels debate whether the confrontation signals a deeper fatigue among entertainers who feel cornered by expectations. Others argue it shows audiences craving authenticity, even when it's messy. The fictional incident becomes less about two celebrities and more about a society negotiating how disagreement should look in public view. Behind the scenes of this dramatized world, talk show producers quietly rewrite their playbooks. Pre-interview calls grow longer, topics are vetted more carefully, and contingency plans are drawn up for unexpected friction. The ease that once defined celebrity chats feels replaced by caution. Everyone remembers how quickly comfort turned into conflict, and how silence from the audience can be louder than laughter. Fans create compilation videos, slowing down the footage, zooming in on facial expressions, adding captions that reinterpret every pause. Some edits portray Jerry as defiant and principled, others as dismissive and rigid. Kelly is alternately framed as courageous or provocative. Each version reinforces the editor's worldview, proving how malleable a single moment becomes once it enters the digital echo chamber. Fictional insiders claim the network debated shelving the episode entirely, but the genie was already out of the bottle. Once clips circulate, erasure is impossible. The conversation shifts toward accountability, not just for words spoken, but for the platforms that amplify them. Live television's rawness is praised and feared in equal measure. The dramatized story imagines younger comedians watching closely, unsure what lesson to take. Some vote to speak their minds no matter the backlash, others resolve to tread carefully, valuing longevity over confrontation. The industry's future feels subtly altered, as if an invisible line has been redrawn by one uncomfortable exchange. Kelly, in this narrative, leans into music and human interest stories for a while, letting the noise dissipate. When asked indirectly about challenging guests, she speaks about curiosity and respect, choosing words with care. Her restraint is interpreted as strength by supporters, avoidance by critics. Silence, too, becomes a statement people are eager to decode. Jerry's fictional return to interviews happens slowly, on his own terms. When he does speak, he emphasizes context and intention, suggesting that nuance often gets lost on live TV. Audiences listen closely, some forgiving, others skeptical. The walk-off lingers like an asterisk next to every subsequent appearance. Academic essays emerge, dissecting the confrontation as an example of performative authenticity. Scholars argue that viewers now expect celebrities to embody their values consistently, leaving little room for misalignment. The Jerry Kelly moment is cited as proof that relatability can unravel when expectations clash without warning. In online forums, long threads stretch for thousands of comments, looping endlessly. Users who never watched the full exchange still argue passionately, fueled by headlines and snippets. The original conversation matters less than the narrative built around it. Fiction blends with assumption until the line between them is barely visible. The dramatization also imagines private reflections. Both figures, alone, replay the moment, wondering if a different tone or pause might have changed the outcome. Regret isn't dramatic or loud, it's quiet and unresolved. Public certainty contrasts sharply with private doubt, highlighting the emotional cost of viral conflict. Over time, the story becomes a reference point in media training sessions. Executives warn newcomers that likability can vanish in seconds. They emphasize listening, flexibility, and exit strategies. The irony isn't lost. The very unpredictability that draws viewers is what everyone now tries to control. Fans eventually move on to the next controversy, but the fictional walk-off remains bookmarked in cultural memory. It's invoked whenever discussions grow heated, a shorthand for what happens when dialogue collapses. Even those tired of the debate recognize its symbolic weight. In retrospectives, some argue the moment was inevitable, the result of long-simmering tensions finally surfacing. Others believe it was a simple misunderstanding magnified by cameras and expectations. Both interpretations coexist, neither fully satisfying, which is why the story endures. This extended fictional narrative suggests that no single moment defines a career, yet some moments redefine conversations. The Jerry Kelly confrontation doesn't erase past achievements, but it reshapes how audiences interpret them, adding complexity to familiar public personas. The story ultimately closes not with resolution, but with ambiguity. That uncertainty is its power. It reminds viewers that public figures are navigating the same imperfect communication as everyone else, only under brighter lights. In that sense, the storming off isn't an ending, but a pause, inviting reflection on how we listen, disagree, and choose whether to stay or walk away. In this imagined continuation, the incident quietly influences how audiences approach televised conversations, tuning in less for promotion and more for the possibility of truth slipping through rehearsed smiles. Viewers start to notice interruptions, tone shifts, and bodied language with sharper awareness. What once felt like background noise becomes meaningful data, as if everyone learned a new language overnight, one shaped by discomfort and unspoken tension. Fictional publicists reference the moment when advising clients, warning that authenticity must be paired with adaptability. They stress that standing firm and standing still aren't the same thing. The walk-off becomes a metaphor used behind closed doors, shorthand for a failure to recalibrate in real time. Even those who admired the conviction acknowledge the cost of refusing to bend, if only slightly. In fan communities, creative reinterpretations emerge. From dramatic reenactments to animated parodies, humor returns to the story, softening its edge. Laughter reframes the conflict, making it easier to digest. Ironically, comedy becomes the tool that heals the rift the argument symbolized, proving its resilience even when questioned. The fictional narrative imagines Kelly encountering guests who subtly reference the incident, testing the waters with careful jokes. She laughs, diffusing tension, demonstrating growth without acknowledgement. Each graceful deflection reinforces her image as composed under pressure, an unspoken rebuttal to claims that the confrontation rattled her more than it did. Jerry, in this dramatized arc, channels the experience into introspection about performance versus conversation. On stage, he jokes about misunderstandings and the dangers of assuming shared context. Audiences applaud, sensing vulnerability beneath the humor. The crowd's response suggests that while conflict divides, reflection can reconnect, if delivered with honesty. Media outlets eventually tire of rehashing the moment, but documentaries and long-form podcasts resurrect it with fresh angles. They interview psychologists, comedians, and hosts, each offering theories about ego, identity, and expectation. The story evolves again, layered with analysis that distances it from gossip and nudges it toward cultural commentary. In classrooms, fictional professors use the clip to discuss rhetoric and framing, students debate who controlled the narrative and one control slipped away. The exercise reveals how power in conversation shifts subtly, often unnoticed until it's gone. The walk-off serves as a case study in how authority can evaporate mid-sentence. The imagined aftermath also touches on audience responsibility. Commentators argue that viewers reward extremity with attention, incentivizing dramatic exits over patient dialogue. This reframing challenges fans to consider their role, suggesting that virality isn't accidental but collectively manufactured through clicks and shares. As years pass in this fictional timeline, the confrontation becomes dated, its once sharp edges dulled by new controversies. Younger audiences encounter it without the original emotional charge, viewing it as history rather than provocation. Distance transforms outrage into curiosity, allowing more balanced interpretations to surface. Retrospective interviews hint that both parties learned something intangible, not lessons neatly packaged, but subtle shifts in approach. The absence of a public reconciliation keeps the story unresolved, yet that lack of closure feels appropriate, mirroring real life where understanding doesn't always arrive with apologies. The dramatized tale suggests that moments of rupture can be oddly productive, forcing industries and individuals to reassess habits long taken for granted. Live television doesn't change overnight, but caution and curiosity begin to coexist. The risk remains, but it's now acknowledged rather than ignored. Fans who once argued fiercely mellow with time, admitting the exchange reflected their own anxieties more than the celebrities. The story's endurance lies in that relatability. It wasn't just about comedy or talk shows, but about how people talk past each other when stakes feel existential. In this extended fictional universe, the walk-off is remembered less for anger and more for vulnerability exposed unintentionally. Two accomplished figures revealed limits, and audiences glimpsed the cost of conviction without compromise. That exposure, uncomfortable as it was, becomes the narrative's quiet center. Future hosts reference the moment obliquely, using it as motivation to listen more carefully and pivot faster. Guests arrive prepared not just with anecdotes, but with awareness. The legacy isn't fear, but attentiveness, a subtle recalibration sparked by one unscripted clash. The story finally settles into legend, retold whenever conversations about media courage and caution arise. Its power lies not in who walked away, but in what remained unresolved. That lingering question keeps the narrative alive, reminding audiences that dialogue is fragile, and walking away is sometimes the loudest line spoken. In this imagined epilogue, cultural critics note how the incident subtly altered audience patience. Viewers become quicker to sense when conversations are veering toward confrontation, and slower to accept polished deflections. The memory of that walk-off trains people to listen between the lines, to notice when humor tightens into armor. What was once background entertainment becomes a shared exercise in reading emotional cues. Fictional network memos circulate about balancing candor with care, emphasizing that friction can be compelling without becoming combustible. Executives speak in metaphors about temperature and timing, lessons learned the hard way. The story becomes a touchstone, not to avoid disagreement, but to manage it with intention before it ignites into something irreversible. In fan retrospectives, the moment is recut with context from earlier interviews, revealing patterns long overlooked. Some argue the seeds were planted in subtle misunderstandings years prior. Others insist it was lightning in a bottle, unpredictable by nature. The debate itself mirrors the original clash, proving the narrative's recursive pull. The dramatized arc imagines comedians discussing the incident in green rooms, half joking, half serious. They trade advice about exit ramps and safe words, acknowledging that vulnerability on camera is a gamble. Laughter masks concern, but the lesson lingers. Even masters of timing can misjudge a beat. Kelly's fictional legacy absorbs the moment as evidence of steadiness under strain. Analysts cite her ability to keep the show moving afterward as a masterclass in live broadcasting. The restraint becomes part of her brand, a quiet counterweight to the spectacle that preceded it. Jerry's imagined reflections surface in oblique comments about boundaries and consent in conversation. Fans parse his words, debating whether they signal growth or defiance. The ambiguity keeps interest alive, allowing supporters and skeptics alike to find validation without definitive closure. In this narrative, the audience itself becomes a character, its silence remembered as the loudest response. That hush is replayed and analyzes as proof that collective energy can shift instantly. The crowd didn't boo or cheer, it listened, stunned, a reminder that spectators shape outcomes as much as speakers. Media literacy advocates use the moment to teach critical viewing, urging people to seek full context before judging. The clip's endurance becomes a cautionary tale about excerpts and amplification. Understanding expands when the frame widens, they argue, even if certainty remains elusive. As time passes, nostalgia softens reactions. The incident is recalled with a rueful smile, less as scandal and more as an emblem of a transitional era. Cultural norms continue to evolve, making the clash feel both dated and instructive, a snapshot of a turning point. Fictional memoirs by producers hint at sleepless nights and emergency meetings, the unseen labor of damage control. These accounts humanize the machinery behind television, revealing how many hands scramble to steady the ship when waves hit unexpectedly. The story inspires creative works as short films, essays, even stage pieces that explore disagreement without villains. Artists mine the tension for nuance, showing how certainty can coexist with care, and how misalignment doesn't require malice to cause harm. In Imagine Future interviews, both figures are asked about that moment and deftly pivot, choosing grace over relitigation. Their refusals become statements in themselves, signaling that some chapters are meant to inform, not be endlessly reopened. Younger hosts cite the episode as motivation to cultivate curiosity first. They speak about asking questions that invite reflection rather than defense. The legacy becomes aspirational, not cautionary, shaping a gentler yet still probing style of engagement. Ultimately, the dramatized saga suggests that walking away can be both an ending and a beginning. It closes one conversation while opening many others, rippling outward through media, audiences, and norms in ways no single participant could control. The final resonance of this fictional account rests in its ordinariness beneath the spectacle. Two people disagreed, misread each other, and chose different exits. The cameras magnified it, but the lesson remains intimate. Dialogue demands patience, and when it falters, the silence that follows tells its own enduring story.